Spinning versus grinding, it's an age-old question that road riders have agonized over for decades. Pedal faster to go faster, spin to win.
Yeah, even at high-level mountain biking, we see a lot of grinding going on, especially those cross-country pros.
But this is e-biking, and we still spin, but for different reasons. So today, we're going to look at some of those factors. So when we talk about spinning versus grinding, we simply mean how fast we're spinning those pedals. So I'm in trail mode and I'm in third gear. My cadence is about 95, 96, something like that. Chris, what are you in?
I'm in sixth gear and I'm doing 52 RPM at the minute.
Right, okay, I mean, my riding feels pretty easy. How do you feel?
I'm actually having to work quite hard to keep up the same sort of speed, but that lower cadence means I'm having to put that extra effort in. Wow. Looks like you're just spinning and gliding up there, no effort whatsoever.
And you know that's going to have a big impact on the battery life.
Definitely.
So you pushing the hard gear, your battery's not going to like that one little bit. Hey, but listen, we're all known to grind on occasion.
True.
The slab, the rock, we were grinding up there.
Yeah, but those things are pretty extreme. Got our weight right over the bars. We started off on a spin, but it turns into a grind purely because how steep it is.
Yeah, exactly. But I guess we could talk about, with the fact that we're all different physically. We could talk about slow versus fast twitch muscle fibers. And there is a science that shows that riders with more slow twitch muscle fibers are more efficient at lower cadences.
Yeah, but enough on the human biology, Steve. We're out in the woods having fun on our bikes, right?
Yeah, no, but I'm just thinking about Lance Armstrong, Chris Froome. They are famous spinners and so successful.
Yeah, true. A lot of the questions we have on the show is actually riders running out of steam on those big climbs. They're tackling those climbs in too high a gear, not getting their cadence right. So maybe we should take a look at that.
Do you know what? I think we should break the whole subject down into points. Before we even get into techniques involved here, first of all, we need to recognize that we're riding e-bikes and we're riding different motors, and each of these motors has different characteristics. Nevertheless, each and every one of them requires you as a rider to learn how to spin rather than to grind away in a harder, higher gear. So the motors then, why are they different? Well, if you look at the Yamaha motor, that is an exceptional climbing e-bike. However, when you, on lower cadences, when you get into the higher cadences, it tends to run out of steam a little bit.
Well, if you take a look at the Shimano, Bros and the Bosch units, they're all pretty capable motors at all different cadence ranges.
Yeah. It's not like the old days though, Chris, is it?
No, typically on the old school pedal mountain bike, we'd attack those climbs pretty hard, you'd be spinning, but that would always turn into a grind. So it's totally different on the e-bike, right?
I think what we're trying to get over here is you can actually tackle some really seriously big hills on an e-bike simply by spinning and giving yourself a bit of a breather.
Yeah, letting that motor work for you.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at the reasons why we spin on our e-bikes. First up, just maintaining that traction. If you're in too hard a gear, it's all too easy to get a wheel spin. Also next up, it just gives you a chance to pick that line. Picking lines on your e-bike is really important, looking ahead and picking that line.
You need to take your time. If you're on a super steep climb, you don't want to rush that, do you? What you said about traction is like, what happens with the motor, if you're pushing a hard gear, there's like a lot of stored energy. So if you come across a route and you stop, suddenly that bike's going to spin
up. Yeah, definitely. Of course, it's going to use a lot more battery power if you're grinding up that hill. The motors like to spin, they like to have an easier life. So as much assist as you can help, it's going to help that motor.
And what about stuff like, when we're climbing, sometimes like there's a route or an obstacle, and it's a lot easier to do that when you're in an easier gear, right?
Rather than in a hard gear. Front wheel, just punch those cranks, lift that front wheel over that little step or ledge on that climb as well.
So why actually would you use grinding as a method on your e-bike? Well, do you know what? I hardly ever grind on the e-bike, only when maybe I want to do a really hard workout over the 25km/h restriction. But in general, I think, only on flat roads, fire roads.
Yeah, I do occasionally do it on a road climb. If I'm trying to chase someone down or something, I'll stick it in that hard gear, get out of that saddle and grind. But
when it comes to technical or any off-road riding, I think spinning is number one. Now, first of all, riding position is really important when you're spinning. As you can see, I'm stood up spinning, whereas Chris is sat down, and because I'm stood up, I'm soon going to run out of steam trying to spin that, and what it's doing is really making the back end of the bike bounce up and down. My legs are already tired. Boom, I'm done. One of the great things about riding e-bikes is it makes year-round riding far more possible compared to a manual e-bike. However, when it comes to mud, it requires some certain techniques. If you're going to be grinding in muddy conditions, all that's going to do is break traction with the rear tyre, which means you're probably not going to get through that bit of technical muddy single track.
Yeah, when you're trying to hit those climbs, especially if they're really muddy, on the e-bike, you need to spin, let that motor work, let that bike just take the momentum. Any forced pedal strike, it's going to break traction with that rear wheel.
So what we're trying to do is keep that wheel spinning really smoothly, not breaking traction at all. So this is what happens if you stick the bike in high gear and stamp on the pedals.
And this is what happens when you spin through there using good technique, feeling that traction, no wheel spin, just trying to let that bike carry the momentum.
Nice. That's beautiful, Chris. That's absolutely copybook, Chris. That is the way to get through mud on a winter's day. Okay, so we're probably exaggerating a bit there with the spinning back tyre. However, some important techniques there to bear in mind, not just spinning versus grinding, but things such as the tyre pressure, the tyre you're using on the rear. Plus, you're going to be sat down, which means there's going to be more weight and more traction through that back tyre when you're going through the mud. Plus, of course, try to keep the momentum smooth. Don't try to do it in sections. Try to do one smooth arc through that mud section.
It's a good thing about when you're spinning on that e-bike, let you read that terrain in front of you. Just get ready for any change in incline on that trail.
Ooh, crikey. And then I guess you could take that to the next level where the trail goes from one angle to an even steeper angle, where spinning sometimes becomes grinding. But nevertheless, it's the only way. Now, spinning is never more important when you're trying to do a climb where you need to keep that traction and that momentum, right, Chris?
Yeah, especially if you're grinding uphill. Any chance that that back wheel gets to lose traction, if you're grinding away, it's just going to spin. You're going to stop. Your mate's going to disappear up that climb. So there you go, spinning is a vital technique to have when it comes to riding that e-bike out on the trails.
Yeah, but obviously it's inevitable that sometimes you're going to have too much grind, and that's okay when you've got really grippy surfaces, really constant surfaces, but as soon as it gets loose or rooty or rocky, then grinding is going to have that, it's going to build up that energy in your rear wheel, and any slight break of traction and that rear wheel is going to be spinning, which is what you do not need on an e-bike.
Right, keep it spinning.
Yeah.
But if you've enjoyed today's video, be sure to check out the Rock, one of our extreme climb series where we were certainly grinding away.
Yeah, and how to master technical climbing, have a look at the video I did just down by here.
Yeah, if you've enjoyed today's video, be sure to give us a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to EMBN and drop any comments below on all your climbing techniques.
Yeah, see you in the woods.